listening to Fighting Game Follies.
It's the #1 podcast for low-level player opinions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Round 1.
Hello to all my masters, grapplers, and set play psychopaths, Wi-Fi warriors, O2ers, tournament organizers, content creators, everybody in the entire FGC scope spectrum and all that is surrounding us. What's happening? It's your boy, your free games, Ziggy Skyward, Games.png, whatever I'm going by for this week's tournament run, and welcome back to another episode of the Fighting Game Follies. Episode 24. We got a decent amount to talk about because a lot of things surrounding patch notes and patches in general have been circulating in the FGC for these last couple of days, specifically for two anime games in mind. You know, we have Arc System Works just going nutty on all of the patches and making a lot of really weird decisions that not a whole lot of people are agreeing with. They're just overall super confused on, and I sort of want to touch on that now, talk about why the patches are the way that they are, what makes them so weird, what makes them so game changing, and just overall what the patch would necessarily ensue for the rest of the game's lifespan, if that game even has a lifespan. I'm looking at you, Dragon Ball Fighters. But with all that said, sit back, relax. If you're doing homework or whatever, please, continue continue on, keep doing what you're doing. You listening while doing something else, potentially playing a fighting game, then I guarantee you DP on Wake Up is going to get you out of every situation. They're not going to figure it out. Trust in the DP. EX it too. If your game allows it, always EX DP on Wake Up no matter what. If you can't super on Wake Up, you lying, because you got to be able to super on Wake Up. All supers are invincible on Wake Up. I won't take any other super. If my super can't super on Wake Up, I don't want it. I don't want it in my game. But yeah, I suggest we, actually start getting, let's get started and let's start talking about it. So, I suggest we start, just with the baseline and start talking about what patch notes are and, how often they normally happen. So, if you don't know or can't infer from the name, a patch note or, patches are basically when the state of the game that, is playing, it gets changed in some way, shape, or form. Normally this happens with a new content drop, but sometimes this will just happen out of the blue random in order to fix the state of the game. A good example of this is if for those who play or for those who remember the Smash 4 days, Bayonetta got 4 separate patches just to deal with her issues and everything, meant to tone her down. Not because there was anything broken wrong with the character, but it was just the fact that she was such a strong character and such a jack of all trades that she could basically handle any situation in the competitive scope, and that wasn't really good for the game's longevity. And that's ultimately what a patch is meant to do. It's meant to keep the game, thriving and living and making everything as balanced and as competitively viable as possible. Sometimes, a patch might happen and then it'll not, be in the best of interest to do. It won't be setting out to do its goal in the most effective way possible. And I feel like that is what the root issue of what these two patches are doing right here. I feel like Dragon Ball Fighters has this issue more rather than Guilty Gear Strive, because Guilty Gear Strive is doing this as its third huge content update, because we are getting season 3. Season 3 means more characters, and on top of that we are also getting new moves for all of these characters that are coming in, some more than others. Right now it's just the base characters. I'll talk about that. Maybe I'll talk about the patch in general and how I'm taking it when I get a tiny bit more time with it and playing it. But I feel like that's the issue with these patches right here, specific, like I said, for Dragon Ball Fighters. Mostly because if you don't know, the change is that all characters can basically do a level 1 into a level 3 if they're in Sparking. Sparking is basically like your burst, your get off me tool, but it can also be, it's more akin to something like an X Factor rather than a burst, which I should have probably said that rather than it's a burst. But it's basically like X Factor. If you don't know X Factor, boy, just know X Factor is everything: the kitchen sink, the living room, the master bedroom. It's all you could ever want. It'll solve all your needs, especially if you're on that last character. Virgil, X Factor, homeboy, I'm motivated, boom, game's won. You don't even have to play the rest of the game pretty much. But the issue with this is the fact that because Dragon Ball Fighters is already such a high damage game, and you can have sparking still whilst you're on your third character. And since there are setups to build a lot of meter and stuff, I'm not all too well versed in Dragon Ball Fighters like that, but I do know that there are a couple setups that are just specifically built to build meter, and then there are characters that are meant to spend that meter. You could essentially, if I'm not mistaken, TOD any character off of just one or two touches, which is ultimately this is what I find with the issue to be the game. And I feel like this is sort of what they tried to do in order to fix it, to make the comeback of, oh yeah, you're able to level 1 into level 3, and then you can use that as a comeback factor. But the fact that you're able to do it in the same combo, even though the damage scaling is completely off the wall, you're basically getting nothing for every hit that you do. It's the fact of the supers itself, and that you're able to do it, is what I feel like might be the issue here. I might look a tiny bit more into it, maybe come back later, depending on how Dragon Ball Fighters goes forward. But the general consensus that I've been getting from a lot of people is that they essentially did this to try and make the community just move forward and play another game, which I think is kind of funny, because this is also another thing that Strive sort of has in common, in that the some of the patches, specifically some of the characters that got patched, and just the overall changes from them, it really did make it seem like they wanted to change characters up a lot, and then just basically, hey, go do something else, go play somebody else, go just do anything. So Dragon Ball Fighters fans, you guys saw Evo. It's pretty much the same thing over there. If y'all want to try and take a look at that, you most certainly can. You already know what's really good there. You have a lot of material to study up on. And on top of that, Fighters isn't really getting any more content updates like that outside of the patch notes, which is another thing that I might want to touch up a tiny bit on, which is the overall frequency of patch notes, and when they actually happen. Because a patch note doesn't necessarily, when a game stops getting updates, that doesn't necessarily mean that the patches are going to stop rolling in. If the community, or if the actual developers care enough, then we might continue to get patches throughout, even though the game might not be getting any more content, and it might be done to, sort of keep that competitive fire going inside of the community. So, like I said earlier, that good example was with Bayonetta. She got patched 4 times after, because she was the last character that was coming for the Smash 4 DLC. She got patched 4 times. They couldn't do anything about it. They were like, "I screw it. We're just gonna wait till Ultimate, try and fix her then." She got completely gutted in Ultimate. She was still relatively good, but not to the same effect of her Smash 4 counterpart. Another good example of a game that is getting content, or rather that is getting patched after the overall game has been done. I guess there's two examples here. One, I was going to say Killer Instinct. Killer Instinct's getting a rollback update, which now is what a lot of games are seeking out to do. They're doing a lot of rollback content updates where they're not adding anything, but they're just sort of adding rollback into the games in order to have them be played for longer, which I think is really good, especially when they're being sold through normal retailers, like for instance Steam or something, or anything else. If their game that they're partnered with has a platform to sell it on, normally it's through Steam, but so a good post game patch notes normally revolves around rollback, rollback netcode, because we love rollback netcode. So that's pretty much it in terms of what I want to talk about and give you baseline knowledge for the patches. Mostly, like I've been saying earlier, patches are meant to impact games. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. Sometimes they just completely change up a character to where they're absolutely nothing from how they used to be played, and this is what sort of makes different characters play completely differently, both in terms of title updates, which is, to give an example, Guilty Gear Sign, Guilty Gear like Exert Sign and then Exert Sign Rev 2, which Sign is a title update, or Rev 2 is a title update to Sign basically, which added more characters. Did a lot of changes. Like basically, it didn't change up the entire game, but because of the amount of content and everything that came from said title update, it changed up the entire game pretty much. But I digress. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about how they impact the game more in this next upcoming segment. But basically, this is all you need to know. Patch notes, they change the game up in either a good or a bad way. You might be, if you're lucky, if the devs really love you, you might get patches like in the future. Most of the time though, it's mostly gonna relegate to like rollback netcode updates. But this is only really for older games if that, like I said, that community still really cares for it, or if they even have the facilities to do a rollback update. You might actually get it from the community before you get it from a legitimate developer, which will eventually inspire the actual developers to go and try and make rollback because they're like, whoa, we're missing out on a lot of money here because there's a lot of people that'll play a lot of games if they have rollback. A good example of this is Persona 4 Arena Ultimax died on arrival sadly because that game launched with delay based, and then in the summer of its release, it got rollback, which I feel like ultimately killed it. They should have waited to release it during the summer, release it with rollback. That would have, I honestly do believe that game would be way more well off if it released with rollback and not on delay based. But I digress. I'll talk about Arena Ultimax, my little like guilty pleasure game later on, which I don't know when I'll talk about it. I might talk about it soon. I'm slowly starting to get back into it. It's a lot of fun. Like if you can find a Discord that has actually no, because the Persona 4 Arena Discord is very active. I haven't gotten the chance to like really hop in there and like play a lot of people though, but like it is very active, and I really do suggest you guys do try out Arena Ultimax because that game is really good. I don't know why I'm shilling out Arena Ultimax here. I just really, man, I just shill out really good games. Almost like how I shilled out Under Night In-Birth a while back. But I digress. I'm just rambling here. Patch notes. They're very good sometimes, very bad sometimes. They're very confusing other times, and they will even spark, I guess, little jokes, little memes in communities, right? But we'll talk about that in a minute.
Round two.
Now, as I was saying before, nerfs can impact a game severely depending on, just overall what the content of the nerf is looking like and just, how long of a patch that nerf is gone or that game is gone without giving a serious, like, nerf. To give an example, Strive, at the end of season 2, nobody really got nerfed, when Asuka dropped, no real balance changes was made, so just all of the changes that are being made during season 3 very like very big just in general because we haven't had changes for effectively like I want to say 3 to 4-ish months, which that might not seem like a long time. I might have the time actually messed up, but just even though it might not seem like a long time in the grand of like a competitively viable game, if you're not supposed to patch a game out like every 2 weeks or anything, but like normally you do want to give a patch out like um I wanna you wanna roll one out like maybe like every couple of months ish on a like relatively decent time frame. I don't want to give like an exact time frame because it sort of depends on the type of game that you're going for in terms of what you want to do with it. But I just think that like patching things, you don't need to like uber patch your game, and you don't need to like also not touch it every 6 months. Just find what's good for you, and then once that's figured out, then you can do whatever basically. But how how do patches and how do balance changes affect your game? Like I was talking about earlier. Because I love bringing this example up because I think it's a really good one and it can sort of go and show you how important game balance really is. Cause the Bayonetta, like just being a Smash player, when Bayonetta dropped, she was like it was Cloud and Bayo that were really running things for Smash 4's lifespan. Like when those characters eventually dropped, and it's because of a lot of different reasons. Mainly the one for Cloud was the fact that he gained limit. Limit was very good. It gave you a speed buff. I think it gave you a damage buff, and on top of that, it gave you access to a different like special which had its own properties, beam blade or like beam shot, whatever you want to call it, was a really decent projectile. Um it just completely boosted his recovery, which like in Smash normally what you want to have is like a good recovery, good air game, and then you're pretty much all set and solid. He had really good combos as well. If I'm not mistaken, like up air, just all of his aerials were like really stupid and really hard to deal with. Um, Actually, yeah, I think his down air was able to be like thing. It was able to be like jump canceled into itself, or not jump canceled. I'm forgetting the like correct Smasher's term, but like it was able to be canceled into itself, which is stupid. Same with its up air, which was also very hard to deal with. His forward air, very good spike, etc., etc. Bale was just a complete monstrosity in and of herself because she had a lot of air mobility outside of using her recovery, which she could then use twice. She had, I think, like three jumps. I don't know. She Bale was a nightmare to deal with, both in like online and in tournament. And once you sort of like see, if you can go back and like watch footage of like old Bale, like both pre-nerch and like when she actually got the buffs, it almost seems like nothing changed because that's sort of what it felt like. It felt like nothing changed in terms of like Bale getting four nerfs. So by the time Ultimate rolled around, they effectively knew what they were doing. They shut down all of her shenanigans. She got completely gutted. Not as good as like you'd still see like a really solid Bale every now and then, but like she was definitely not as much as the monster that was running things back in Smash 4, which is ultimately, like I've been saying, the goal that you want to get for balancing. You both want your game to be balanced, but at the same time you don't want it to be the same like, oh, let me pick X, Y, and Z character because they're really like strong and tough, and then they have a lot of really good answers to a lot of questions, or not questions, but like they can answer and respond to a lot of things that you generally need to and have answers and response to in a fighting game. But this can sort of go in like both a good and a bad route. If you're overbalancing your game, you get something like Street Fighter 1, which was like really bad because you can only play one other character, which was effectively the same character with the same move set, same values, which was just super boring. And then if you overbalance or like just like completely go off the walls with it, you get something like Super Street Fighter 2. I think it's called like Rainbow Edition, where it was just Street Fighter but on crack. And looking at footage for this game will always like it'll make me think like, man, Marvel really got like a crazy graphic change and everything, because that's what it just sort of seems like to me. It just seems like Marvel but like somehow crazier than Marvel, which is already a like testament to and of itself, because Marvel is a crazy game. Almost every installment of Marvel is kind of wacky, save for like Marvel Infinite, because Infinite is not good. But I'm sort of getting off track here. Um, just patch notes. Another good patch that I sort of want to look at is like over the course of Street Fighter 4's lifespan, specifically Street Fighter 4 Ultra, because if you don't know, Street Fighter like during this time was sort of known for having invincible reversals that you'd be able to use on Wake Up. Famously Shoryu, you were able to always do that on Wake Up. EX Shoryu normally would give you the properties of, I think, like the medium with like either damage or just some of the properties of like the light or heavy version, depending on what you wanted. It was normally the best of everything while still having its own issues. Um, but what you could do if you don't know Ultra Street Fighter 4 or just Street Fighter 4 in general, what you're allowed to do is for 2 bars of meter, you're able to cancel a move. Which it's basically like a roaming cancel. It's called like a focus attack dash cancel. Um, and it's very important, like, because that's essentially what makes up like the combo game for Street Fighter 4, mostly because you're allowed to do things like focus attack dash cancel into Ultra, which was how a lot of characters got their more higher damaging combos, and it's a very important part of the game plan and just the overall core. It's a core thing that you needed to learn, sort of like how parrying in Street Fighter 3 is a very core thing that you need to learn, because it makes up for what the more intermediate and higher level play is going to be getting based around. It's okay, how do I respond to X character FADCing whatever they do in order to make themselves safe? Which ultimately was the goal to FADC something to make it safe. So let's say somebody shoryus, right? Or let's say you shoryu. FADC it, boom, you're good, you're solid, right? If it hits, you let it rock. If it hits, you can FADC it in the ultra. If it like gets blocked, you FADC it, you're safe, you're solid, right? Rio was able to do this for a good while of the game's lifespan until he eventually got a nerf actually, which allowed him, or not allowed him, excuse me, but it basically took away his ability to cancel it into the heavy Shoryu. So his heavy Shoryuken, he was not able to FADC that. He wasn't able to focus attack dash cancel it, thus making it unsafe if it were to be blocked. However, and I'm referencing this from Corey's video on buffs and nerfs, which is a really good video. I'll link that down in the description below. What this ultimately ended up doing is giving players more character expression and letting them do more things that they wanted to do with their character, because if you have the resources to cancel it, right? And make something that is generally more unsafe safe. You know, logic dictates that you would do that. You would make the more unsafe thing safe. However, doing the unsafe thing whilst having the resources to make it safe, right? That in and of itself is sort of like, I don't want to say a power trip per se, but it sort of speaks to a, oh, I'm big ballin', right? Like I'm very confident that this will hit, and if it doesn't hit, I'm willing to take whatever punishment I get. That in of itself is such a call out that it's respectable. Like you sort of have to like take that, because if given the opportunity to, right? Like you, let's say you have like a 50% chance of getting hit there, right? And you go for it. That's good. That like solid, cool. You maybe don't get like the most out of it if you do something like for example, light or medium shoryu, which was able you were able to FADC that. Um as opposed to like heavy, like I've been saying, you weren't able to FADC it, making it super unsafe if you got blocked, right? You eat whatever punishment, you eat whatever combo you eat, right? You're constantly swinging for the fences, which is something that like that's super respectable. You have to respect someone who has either the mindset for it or just doesn't care, which is still I think is really cool. Another patch that I think is also like really like this is more on the bad side, I guess, because this more, or I guess I can claim this to be more on the bad side because this specifically has something to do with my character. Back in the earlier seasons of Guilty Gear Strive, Ramathal originally she had like an infinite block string combo that relied on a guard crush effect that you would get from her Rekkas, which like you would also be able to dash cancel into. So basically, what it would be is Rekka 1 guard crush. You could Rekka 2 guard crush into dash, cancel the Rekka 2 into a dash, and then cancel said dash into sword toss. Sword toss you would then do, I think like it was 6H, and then flip, which is her 214K, and then repeat that cycle all over again. And as you are doing this, you are also getting positive bonus as well. There's a lot of videos on it, which honestly I think it like the RAM block string and like the discourse that stemmed from it, I think will always be probably one of the more fun times that I've had with Guilty Gear Strive, especially just learning the string in general, because I thought it was super cool to be able to do something like this, and then also just sort of like there was counterplay around it obviously, and plus it wasn't truly infinite because it also relied on RCing at some point. I forget where you had the RC, but it did also rely on Roman canceling at some point in order to keep the string going. I think it was during the 6H you had the RC. I don't remember. I gotta dig up old footage of it. I should have actually done that before talking about it here, but I think this block string, I think the block string was really cool. But in order to sort of change this infinite, they removed the effect, which ended up sort of buffing the character in a lot of sneak ways, which it got rid of the guard crush effect, and getting rid of that guard crush effect allowed for, obviously Ram didn't have access to the block string, but it allowed for a couple of other options and stuff that sort of opened up the eyes to a lot of Ram players and allowed them to do a lot of cooler stuff, which I feel like ultimately is what the goal of a patch should be, or like a nerf, a buff, or whatever. You should be, your overall goal should be to change whatever problem is present with the character, but I feel like in doing so, you should also open up the character to something else and basically like give a different avenue and a different way of looking at the character's move set and allowing your player to do something else, because in this ram like change, what it did was it basically separated ram players into, I want to say, like three different categories, right? You had the players that were just picking up RAM after they, like, they saw the infinite. They were like, oh, this is really stupid. I need to learn how to play this. I need to learn how to play against it. You had the more intermediate RAM players who knew the applications of a lot of or everything in her move set but weren't using it to the fullest. And then you have the players that he really understood RAM and understood how, like, even though this change was an effective nerf, you can do a lot more interesting and cooler things with it. Like, for example, S Squirrel, who's the one that actually showed me a lot of the things, like, didn't show me personally, obviously, but like I studied up on their videos while I was like watching a lot of their stuff because that's where I was mostly getting a lot of my RAM tech. During that time, it was like Squirrel and a couple other like just pickpocket like RAM players and everything. I would just see something, be like, oh, that's sick. I can incorporate that into my gameplay. But Squirrel was mainly the one that I was like stealing a lot of stuff from because they're just a really good RAM player and a really good like just insight on how to play the character. I know that they dropped like some season 3 stuff that I'm going to go over. Don't forget, playing fighting games is also about doing your homework. Study up, learn your character to the fullest, and all of that good jazz. But I digress. A lot of the changes that could be made, or a lot of the changes that are made, normally they do sort of entail a tiny bit of digger deeping that you might want to go and check out. It's like that. That's also what I feel like is happening with this new move that Ram got as well. Which is slowly starting to get some applications for it right now. If I'm not mistaken, I think you can do like corner to corner coast to coast like wall break stuff too, which I think is super sick. It's not practical in any way, or I mean, it might be like the tiniest bit practical, but like, I digress. We'll talk about that more when we overall talk about, the season 3 changes of Guilty Gear Strive and start talking about all of the crazy things that happened in this patch.
Round 3.
So now let's actually start getting and start talking about the new Guilty Gear Strive Season 3 patches that I wanted to take a tiny bit of time and like really, really get to learn so that I don't just like come in day one be like, oh, this is what I think, this is what I feel like, blah 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 blah. So right off, first off the bat, you're probably wondering, all right, what happened? What changed? And a lot of things changed. This game, what I've been saying about it is it feels very similar to something like a title update. I feel like this is like the amount of content that we would have gotten if this were to be a title update. Like for example, you have Guilty Gear Xrd, and then you have Guilty Gear Xrd Sign, and then Xrd Sign Rev 2. And those, like every time that the title changes, you get a mass amount of updates to the characters, game systems. You get new DLCs and everything, like new DLC season and whatnot. And it's just overall a complete renovation of the game, how the game plays. Maybe some things got added, maybe some things got taken away, maybe some things work, some others like don't. All that matters is that a lot like just the overall landscape of the game and what it wants to do has changed. And like I was saying about how this feels like a title update, a lot of the things about Guilty Gear Strive that we've, previously had within like these past 3 years, they haven't necessarily changed like a whole bunch, but they do in fact feel both like I'm playing the same game and that I'm also not playing the same game at like certain times. Basically, what you need to know is that they added a couple new things. First off, they added Johnny. They gave a decent amount of characters new moves or like new applications to existing moves. So, for example, May now instead you used to be able to, if you were to like hold and charge the dolphin, depending on how long you held the button for, you were able to determine the distance that it went. Now the dolphins all go a set distance, but she now can either like preemptively stop the dolphin if she presses K whilst it's like mid travel, or if she presses P, then she like stops the dolphin like mid travel, or if she presses K, then she jumps and then she's able to do a move like an air move or an air normal or anything out of said jump. Um, a lot of things like that sort of thing. They either like added something for the character's game plan in order to make it better, or they gave them a new tool in order to like strengthen said game plan and make getting to your win condition easier. So another thing, for example, or what I've been hearing people say is that Ino essentially got a new move, which is basically something like Garuda Impact that Potemkin has, but it's just in the air, which with Ino being a very heavy mix-up character, is something that she can use in order to open you up and then like get the necessary hits in or the necessary links in order to like break down your off or your defense and then continue her game plan and whatnot. Anji, he got a DP, I think, out of his spin move, but I've been hearing from Anji players that it's really bad, so yeah, shout outs to them. I feel very bad. You guys are like always struggling. I pour one out for all the Anji players out there. And my favorite, Ramethal, she got a new move where it's basically an mid-screen only thing that allows you to pull your opponent in, and then you're able to get a couple of certain things off of that. However, because she has that move, her speed got decreased, and a lot of like her other normals and whatnot, they aren't really given the same properties that they had in previous patches. Which, like I was saying earlier, with the whole Season 1 RAM Infinite thing, I'm not really a stranger to this. I know that this happens every. You'd like in order to fix things about the character and make the game more balanced. But I'm not really sure how I feel about a couple of these changes per se, especially with the big mechanic that a lot of people have been like sort of pointing to right now, that being the deflect shield and the wild assault. Now, I think the wild assault, which and for those who don't know or aren't into gear like that, they added two new things that you're able to use the burst like gauge for. So on top of like using burst for, it's a get off me tool if you're mid combo. If you do it whilst you're not getting hit, then you were essentially rewarded with like 100% of your meter, and then you can do the stuff from that. But now they changed it, so initially back in like older days, the burst had a very like set radius that a lot of people would bait and whatnot, but now it goes full screen in order to deal with things like zoners and whatnot. And now, instead of getting like your full tension immediately right off of the bat, you instead enter the state known as positive bonus, where you passively get your meter, your tension over time, on top of like like just regularly playing the game. This I'm fine with. The like burst changes and everything is good. It allows for the defensive mechanics and like the mechanics to ensure that players don't get 100% curb stopped to be better, both in the offensive and the defensive way, because burst now also, when you hit a positive burst, it also allows you to build more burst back effectively, so that you can do things like the two new mechanics that I alluded to earlier, which uses the burst gauge. And these mechanics are wild assault and the deflect shield. The wild assault, basically it's quarter circle forward D. It allows you to do a move. It has like differing properties depending on the characters. So for example, bigger body characters like Potemkin, Nagoriyuki, Bedman, they have a white version which is not invincible on startup, but it is invincible throughout the entirety of it, and it also causes guard crush. You have characters like Baiken, Happy Chaos. I'm trying to think who else has a blue. I think May might have one. I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but more setup heavy characters that aren't like 100% offense or like complete rushdowns or anything like that. They have a blue one, which also it causes guard crush, but it only causes guard crush right now. And you can't really use it in combos like that without having to set it up in a couple of things. And then you have like the more standard one, which is like the red or orange. I think it's orange. But the orange wild assault, which you're able to use it in combos. You're able. It doesn't guard crush, but you're able to use it in combos and everything, and then keep your offense going, and then you can immediately cancel a button out of it in order to continue your offense. And the wild thing about this, the wild assault, the wild part of the wild assault is the fact that if you hit someone with it, right, on hit, on block, doesn't matter. If it makes content, it takes away a small part of the burst gauge, meaning that any other action that you do afterwards, you just aren't able to burst it. Doesn't matter what you do. You physically cannot burst it because you do not have the amount, like the full burst gauge in order to completely burst it. You can still do things like YRC. If you have an invincible reversal move, you can still do that, but it doesn't matter because you can't burst it. So if you get hit, you have to hold it basically. And I'm fine with this. I see no issue with this. I'm like, especially because like it costs half of your burst gauge, so you're essentially making a very lopsided trade of like I'm giving you half of my burst gauge. If I hit, then whatever the combo works, I get positive bonus. I make that back passively. If it doesn't work, you get your burst back. You can do whatever you want with that. Any combos I get hit with, I have to hold them now because I am way like I'm losing more in the burst economy basically. But I don't have an issue with Wild Deflect or not Wild Deflect. Whoa, I don't have an issue with Wild Shield. I think it's a very good change for the game. It keeps the offensive nature that Guilty Gear is sort of known for being fast paced, for being like all up in your face. It keeps that energy alive and well, especially since I've been seeing a lot of people on Twitter do like round start unburstable wall break combos or like just crazy insane coast to coast, wall to wall, back and forth like we play in ping pong style like combos. It's a good addition to the game. What I feel like isn't really the best of additions to the game in order to, sort of alleviate that and make defensive options a tiny bit stronger is they also added something called Deflect Shield. And the Deflect Shield, you do it quarter circle back and then D, and then it basically makes a all-encompassing, all blockable shield that you're able to. It doesn't matter if they try and hit you low, overhead, mid. It completely like blocks it, and then it sends them to about like half screen around like round start neutral-ish area, which is really good. You can still get thrown out of it, but if they strike you, if they hit anything, then it doesn't matter. They still what have you. They still get pushed back. What I'm not really a fan of in terms of this mechanic is the fact of if you have a sort of built-in projectile move, which this is kind of like it's not really common for a lot of characters, but I still feel like this is something that you should say, or something that I want to say. A good example is like Testament's Grave Reaper. If you deflect that, Testament still does get knocked back, but if I'm not mistaken, you can still get hit by the second hit of Grave Reaper, which is kind of an issue. I feel like the deflect shield should last for the entirety of whatever you're getting hit by. Supers in general, like I know for a fact, Ram Super like the big laser, if you deflect shield the first part, then like you still get hit for it, which is kind of stupid because hey, I thought I did the thing to push her away. Then why am I still getting hit for it? Oh well. Um, it also just doesn't really feel like it functions the way that the developers sort of had in mind for it to function. A good example of this is actually with Faust. A lot of people have like been showing off on Twitter that if you try and do deflect shield on a banana peel, the game will just straight crash, which I think is hilarious. And TOs should allow that, like unless they come out with a patch for it anytime soon, which at the recording of this episode they have not made a patch for it yet. I wonder when that's eventually dropping, but when TOs should allow that to happen, and then if it happens like mid set or whatever, like we should play it. I don't think we should replay it the set out, but at the same time I really don't want like the Faust or the opponent to win. I don't know. We'll have to like figure something out. I haven't played rock paper scissors to see who gets that round, or like just that game. But overall, I do think the game is in a really good state. I tried playing Johnny. Johnny's kind of I'm not really like the biggest fan of Johnny right now. I did say that I am going to try and play him. I have been trying to play him. He's kind of fun, but my only like real issue with him is the fact of his sort of weirdo movement in that his step dash. It's like a regular step dash, but you can't immediately act out of it like the other characters that have step dashes. And it's sort of, even though it doesn't seem like it has recovery, it does have recovery, which is where that whole like you can't act out of it immediate thing is weird. So it's like whole timings for everything is very off. His like doing things like for example, if I were to do like Misfinder P, which launches them up into the air, into like the step dash kick. The kick doesn't connect because it's like too slow and won't come out in time. So things like that, things that I just sort of feel like would be like common nature to try and do, it just doesn't work. I know that you can do 6K into 5P for that, but it's still just if you're close to the wall or something, then I feel like just doing 5K into whatever else you would want to do would just like sort of make more sense, or at least that's what I think. Another thing is also just getting like Mistfinder in general is just a very like wacky move in both a good and bad sense because I I just don't understand what they were initially planning or what they were initially like trying to think up and do when making the move because if you get hit by it like you go tumbling. And when I mean tumbling, I mean like full like rolling for a good like 30 seconds before you're able to act again and you go super far. So Johnny is just able to like completely move in and since all of his stuff is like either forward advancing or set something up to allow him to do a forward advancing move, like I said earlier, 6K or his 2H, which is like for another forward advancing move that he has, he's sort of just allowed to like come in on you for free if you get hit by like a stray misfinder, which I'm not really like the biggest fan of. And plus, on top of that, you can sort of just also get like zoned out by Misfinder as well, since he goes into the same stance, meaning that like, oh, if I try and move in, he might hit me with a low, meaning that I can't dash block it. He might like Tiger Knee, do downward Misfinder, which is an instant overhead, which is crazy, allowing him to get true 50-50 mix. Like, there's a lot of things about the character that I personally don't really agree with because I feel like it's sort of not really something that the game needed, at least not right now. But I don't feel like Johnny's introduction was like, or his introduction to all of these things that like previously I didn't really need to do or need to like be wary of, is really like the smoothest way to like push Guilty Gear into a newer era. If you think I'm talking sort of scrubbish or if I'm just like being stupid or like, oh, I think I disagree with you, by all means, come at me. Like, I'm not a top player. I'm not like the hottest guy out. I'm like I barely make Celestial. I'm 10.5. I barely make Celestial, and even then like I only really get on Celestial on like good runs and I immediately get knocked out, which is insane. So if you want to like disagree, have a discussion with it, by all means, like I'm open for it. Like, you guys know where to find me: Twitter, Instagram, like MySpace. I don't know. You guys know where to find me if you're like interested and want to like house a discussion on the like game and how the game's balance should be. Ultimately, like it's not gonna or not it's not gonna matter, but like I'm I'm down to have this discussion. If you guys want to like have this discussion as well, I'm like 100% for it. And maybe we might even come back and talk on this topic again in a couple, I don't want to say years because I think season 4 is supposed to only be lasting till I think like winter of 2024. Maybe at the end of that time frame we can like go look at this again, look back from season 3 to like the start of season 3 to the end of season 3, see how much the game has changed, see if the game is going in a direction that the people are really agreeing with, because I think having discussions like this and having little time capsules where we're able to see like certain states of the game and like how it's played out right now is really important because it goes to show what the players and what the like just everybody is thinking on right now. See how it eventually grows. See how like what worked, what didn't work, what got changed, what we think shouldn't have been changed, etc., etc. But I think that's actually no, that's not where I'm going to call it because I did really quickly want to talk about the or actually no, if I'm not mistaken, I did already talk about the Dragon Ball patches, but if I did, oh well. I just think it's kind of funny how like the game, man, Arxis patches right now, they're not really the hottest that they've been, or at least in my opinion, they're not really the hottest that they've been. Hopefully that changes in the future. Maybe Harada was being a prophet and talking about how, oh yeah, he finna blow Street Fighter, not Street Fighter 6, but like Guilty Gear out the water right now. And just like, man, Tekken 8 right now, Tekken 8's in a really good spot right now. I can't wait to like talk about that in the future because we did get a lot of info. We got a release date finally coming out, February, or no, I'm thinking of Persona 4 or Persona 3. If I'm not mistaken, it comes out like January 26th, around that time, like 2024, which it might seem like a long time from now, but that's not really a long time from now. So, yeah, I suggest y'all start hitting the grind on Tekken 7. I know I have. I really do want to learn this game, and I really do want to get into it and like really sink my teeth into this. Mortal Kombat, not so much. I don't really care about it. It's dropping like I think September 19th, which we are in September right now. So everybody's doing their countdowns. 18 days until Mortal Kombat. So be on the lookout for that. I'll probably talk more about that when the game eventually comes out. I'm most likely not gonna play it though, or if I do, then it's not gonna be like what I really spend time into right now. But that'll be all from me. I've been your host, Group for Games, the Skyward Games.png. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Fighting Game Follies. You guys know where to find me: Twitter, Instagram, like all the spots where I do all of my conversing and all of my talk on various fighting game things and whatnot. Um, I'm here. I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm always gonna be here. And once again, I really do appreciate you guys for listening and like staying tuned and listening to my like mid-tier ramblings. I really appreciate it. I really do love you guys a whole lot. I love being in this chair talking to you guys and like just going on about like everything that like I can see in the fighting game community and everything because like I've been saying, I really do want to make my mark really and like just like talk more and give the like more of the lower end spectrum of people a voice. And if I'm the medium for that, and I get to be the medium for that, then we're so up, and we will never not be up. But yeah, that's all from me. Once again, I appreciate it. Be sure to play some fighting games. Play anything that you want, older, newer titles, doesn't matter. We up and we living and we are constantly eating. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay up, and continue to play fighting games.